why Chrome Hearts has a streetwear industry in a chokehold, okay? Chrome Hearts has almost no traditional advertising. It rarely collaborates, it doesn't run seasonal sales, it doesn't chase influencer, doesn't pay for placement, and doesn't explain itself when the press asks why 400 pair of socks sells out in an hour. And somehow, a pair of socks, somehow it's one of the most desired brands on the planet, run by rock stars, rappers, tech billionaires, and teenagers who have saved for 6 months to afford a singular ring. I know some of you LARPers out there, okay? You guys are definitely to blame, right? Most brands will spending millions of dollars to trying to become that relevant. Chrome Hearts made people chase them instead, right? No hype machine, no marketing department in the traditional sense. No collab calendar dropping every 6 weeks to keep the algorithm ahead. Just a family-run jewelry and leather company out of a factory in Hollywood that somehow ended up dictating taste to an entire industry. So how do they do it? That's what we're going to be breaking down today. Chrome Hearts wasn't built in a boardroom. It was literally built in a garage. In 1988, a leather dealer named Richard Stark started making custom motorcycle gear for himself and the riders he knew. Chaps, jackets, vests. Stark had spent years around premium leather as a hide dealer, and he had a carpenter's training underneath that, which meant he understood materials and construction the way most designers never do. He was not trying to start a fashion line, trying to make gear that didn't exist anywhere else for people who rode the same bikes that he did. He brought in two partners early on, a jeweler and a leather manufacturer. And the three of them built the first version of the brand, and it's small and specific, leather goods for a niche of people who valued craft over convenience, all made by hand, all made in-house. Turning point wasn't a marketing campaign, it was proximity. Los Angeles in the late 80s and early 90s was full of the exact people who wore what Stark was making. Musicians, bikers, industry insiders who lived on the edge of Hollywood's rock and roll scene. Chrome Heart pieces started showing up on brands like Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, not because Stark paid for the placement, because those were the people already in his orbit, like those are the people around him, right? Which should be already giving you a little bit of a hint of what we're going to be talking about. Product found its audience because the audience and the maker were already standing in the same rooms. By the early 90s, the original partnership dissolved and Stark bought out his co-founders, bringing his wife Lori Lynn Stark into a formal role of running the business alongside him. That's the moment that Chrome Heart stopped being a leather shop and became a worldview. Jewelry. Heavy silver, oversized crosses, flirted lists, gothic lettering, and the dominant category in the brand's signature language. They are kept expanding sideways. Eyewear, furniture. It kind of became what we know today, right? Furniture, rugs, even custom work like pool tables and private jet interiors, which they have some crazy private jet interiors, Chrome Heart theme, right? Every new category obeyed the same design grammar, which meant the brand never diluted itself as it grew into every direction. 1996, the first Chrome Heart boutique opened in Manhattan. It didn't look like a typical luxury store, and it didn't behave like one either. No seasonal collections announced on the calendar, no press reviews, no explaining. Pieces simply appeared when the Starks decided they were ready. Next two decades built the mythology. Celebrities didn't get gifted Chrome Heart as part of a PR strategy the way most luxury houses operate today. They sought it out because owning it signaled you were plugged into something the mainstream had not caught on to yet, which you kind of saw back in like the early 2000s. Like I remember seeing Jim Jones back in Chrome Heart in like 2004, bro. As hip hop culture and streetwear collided with high fashion in the 2010s, Chrome Heart sat at the exact intersection those worlds were racing toward. Heavy metal jewelry, gothic typography, biker gang exclusivity, and old money craftsmanship. All worn by the same artist shaping global youth culture. The Stark's daughter, Jessie Jo, later stepped into the business too, keeping it a family operation to this day. No private equity, no outside board dictating growth targets, just a company that has spent almost 4 decades refusing to explain itself and getting more desired every year because of it. That refusal is the whole story. Which brings us to the part that actually matters if you're trying to learn from this, right? This is going to be the psychology behind Chrome Hearts. Anyone can list Chrome Heart's aesthetic signatures, the cross, the gothic font, the sterling silver. That's not why the brand works though. The aesthetic is just the costume. The psychology is the engine underneath it. Chrome Hearts is not manufactured at the volume its demand would justify. Pieces are handmade in limited runs, largely at a single production site. That's not a marketing tactic bolted onto the business. It's a structural limitation that happens to produce a marketing effect. When supply is capped by craftsmanship rather than by a strategist spreadsheet, scarcity reads as authentic instead of manipulated. A lot of people do fake their scarcity for their businesses. I've done it before. Not gonna lie, right? People can feel the difference. Nobody buys a Chrome Heart cross because they need another piece of jewelry. They buy it because it tells a story about who they are: rebellious, discerning, plugged into something exclusive. Product functions as a badge before it functions as an object, which is facts. I got my Chrome Heart right here, bro. Chrome Heart hat right here, right? Chrome Hearts does not even sell most of its jewelry online. You often have to know where to go, sometimes even who to ask. That friction is deliberate. Anything frictionless gets commoditized in the attention economy, abundant and forgettable, right? Friction forces intention, and intention is what makes an object feel earned rather than purchased. Starks are still the designers. The factory is still in Hollywood. The story hasn't been outsourced to a brand agency. In an era where consumers are unusually good at detecting manufactured coolness, which they are very good at detecting, so you have to be authentic with your brand. Brand whose founders who still personally signs off on the work carries a credibility no ad campaign can fabricate. Anti-marketing is marketing. Chrome Heart's near total absence of advertisement isn't a gap in their strategy. It functions as a signal. A brand that doesn't need to advertise reads psychologically as a brand that's already arrived. The silence itself becomes a flex. Community and cultural gatekeeping. Because the brand grew out of a real subculture, bikers, rock musicians, the Hollywood underground, rather than a demographic study, it retained the feeling of belonging to someone rather than belonging to everyone, which is what I talked about niching down and really building a brand identity that people feel a part of. Wearing it plugs you into that lineage, whether or not you were around for the original scene. It has a luxury psychology to it. Traditional luxury sells heritage and craftsmanship through polish. Think a clean Paris atelier. Chrome Heart sells the same craftsmanship through grip. It borrows luxury obsession with details and pairs it with a rock and roll fused with light about it. That combination is rare. Rarity of positioning is as valuable as a rarity product. Rebellion. Surely held. A lot of brands perform rebellion as a marketing costume. Worth noting, and this part is more interpretation than documented fact. That Chrome Hearts rebellion reads is more credible because it long predates the brand's fame. The company operated on its own terms for years before the wider culture caught up to it, which makes the "we don't care what you think" posture feel earned rather than staged, which is very true, bro. Chrome Heart can literally do anything they want now, damn near same as Supreme, but they've built up their brand identity and brand world so much that you want to be part of it, right? They have craftsmanship as proof. Heavy gauge sterling Sylvan, hand finished leather, a single production campus doing the making rather than an outsourced factory network. The craft is not incidental. It's the collateral that backs every other psychological claim the brand makes. Without it, the mystique would collapse the first time someone actually has a product. Culture capital, right? Flex culture, right? Owning Chrome Hearts doesn't just say I have money, it says I know something you don't. That distinction, which is status through knowledge rather than status through price tag, is a far more durable currency, right? Everyone knows that what Chrome Hearts is. You get looked at differently for having it on. Because it can't be replicated by just someone else spending more. Every one of these levers reinforce the others. Scarcity without craftsmanship would just be annoying. Rebellion without authenticity would just be branding. It's a stack of them all operating together that makes the effect feel inevitable instead of engineered. The playbook here are the strategic lessons underneath the aesthetic and how a brand with none of Chrome Heart's resources could apply the same systems. 1. Let scarcity come from a real constraint, not a fake one. Chrome Hearts is scarce because it's handmade in limited volume. But scarcity is a byproduct of how the product is actually made. Most brands try to manufacture scarcity artificially through countdown timers and only 10 left banner. Something, again, I've been guilty of, right? And customers can smell the difference. A small brand can build real scarcity by limiting drops to what can actually be produced with care rather than pretending abundance is limitation. Number 2, you want to build your aesthetic language once, then apply it everywhere, okay? The cross, the gothic type, the heavy silver. That visual shows up on jewelry, furniture, eyewear, and jackets, and never breaks character. Like Chrome Hearts always looks like Chrome Hearts. It has the same aesthetic. When I see a Chrome Hearts piece, I'm immediately like, that is Chrome Hearts, right? And a small brand should know one distinct visual and philosophical language before expanding into new categories. So every new product extends the world instead of diluting it. Number 3, you want to sell proximity to a world, not a product specifically. Nobody buys Chrome Hearts for the meteorology. They buy it to feel adjacent to the world it represents. Small brand can do this without money by documenting its actual process, people, and philosophy. The world doesn't have to be glamorous. It has to be specific and real. And number 4 is you want to use friction deliberately. Chrome Hearts' refusal to sell everything online creates intention. A small brand can build the same effect through waitlist, application-only access, or limited release windows. Not to manipulate, but to filter for people who actually want to be there. Number 5 is let silence be a signal. The brand's absence of traditional advertising reads as confidence. Small brand doesn't need a big ad budget to borrow this. It needs to resist the urge to over-explain or oversell every post. Trust the restraint itself communicates value. Number 6, root the brand in something that predates the marketing. Chrome Hearts started as gear for a real biker subculture years before anyone thought of it as fashion. That history is what makes the mythology credible. Small brand should find itself in something the owner is genuinely embedded in, a scene, a craft, a lived experience. Because manufactured backstories rarely survive scrutiny, okay? People can read the fake, man, I'm telling you, okay? Number 7 is make craftsmanship the collateral behind every claim. Every psychological lever Chrome Hearts pulls is backed by the fact that the product is genuinely well made. A small brand's version of this quality control that's actually obsessive, even at a tiny scale. Because the story only works if the product holds up when someone actually touches it. Number 8, sell status through knowledge, not just through price. Chrome Hearts cultural capital comes from insider knowledge, not sticker price. A small brand can build this by creating genuine lore, inside references, a consistent internal language, those only real followers recognize. Right? The belonging becomes the reward, not just ownership. Number 9, keep ownership close. Starks have run Chrome Hearts as a family business for almost 40 years with no outside board diluting the vision. Small Brand's version of this is protecting creative control for as long as possible, resisting the pressure to chase every trend just because an investor or algorithm demands it. Please don't do this. That shit will ruin your brand because it's not going to differentiate your brand. It's going to be another brand doing it. I'm not saying you can never do trends, but you know what I'm saying, right? 10, let the gram grow sideways from a stable core. From leather to jewelry to furniture to fragrance, every expansion still feels unmistakably Hearts. Small brand should expand into new categories only once its core identity is strong enough to stretch. Otherwise, growth just spreads the brand thinner instead of wider. Then we're going to talk about common mistakes. Most brands that try to imitate Chrome Hearts fail, and almost always for the same reason. Copying the crosses instead of the philosophy. Gothic lettering and cross motifs have been imitated endlessly across streetwear. None of these imitators inherited the mystique because the symbols were never the source of the value. They were the visible tip of a much deeper system, right? Artificial scarcity. Manufacturing fake urgency, only 3 left flash countdowns, manufactured waitlists with no real restraint behind them. Reads is desperate rather than exclusive. Because customer todays are unusually literate in marketing manipulation. Yes, customers know when they're being sold to. Customers can read out a sale. Customers can, I'm about to scroll off. He's trying to sell me something. Very good, right? They have luxury pricing without luxury perception. This is a very common mistake. Charging premium prices does not create premium. Chrome Hearts pricing works because of craftsmanship, scarcity, and cultural capital all justify it simultaneously. Price without the surrounding system just looks like overreach. So, celebrity chasing. Paying for placements or gifting product to influencers in bulk is the opposite of how Chrome Hearts built its celebrity association, which grew organically because famous people were already embedded in the same came from. Manufactured association rarely produces the same credibility. Using using expensive with desirable. High price tag signals cost. Desirability requires an entire psychological identity, scarcity, and authenticity working together. Brands that skip straight to expensive without building that stack just end up looking overpriced, copying the look instead of the system. This is the mistake underneath all the other mistakes. The aesthetic is downstream of decades of specific history, real subcultural roots, and discipline. Lifting the visual language of the system behind it produces something that looks like Chrome Hearts and functions like nothing at all. Okay, and how to apply this to a small brand? Okay, imagine you're running a clothing brand with 500 followers and almost no budget. Can't out manufacture and can't out advertise anyone. Definitely can't out scarce a brand that's been building mystique for decades. But you can still borrow the thinking. Start with identity and not inventory. Before you design another product, get specific about what your brand actually believes. Not a mission statement, but a real point of view that would make some people love you and other people shrug. Okay, that's what I'm saying by be niche, bro. If you post something and it's like a chance that everyone's gonna like it, I wouldn't post it. I post things knowing that some people are gonna dislike it, right? But Chrome Heart's point of view was rock and roll, biker build, unapologetically heavy. Yours doesn't have to look anything like that. It just has to be equally specific. Then build storytelling around that process, right? Not just the product. You don't need a celebrity studied backstory. You need to document what you're actually doing, the decisions, the failures, the reasoning, consistently enough that people watching feel like they're witnessing a world being built in real time, not a product being sold to them. From there, you want to build community before you scale. Chrome Heart's early growth came from proximity to a real scene. Your version of that scene might be a group chat, a small set of repeat customers, a local community you actually show up for, right? Depth of 50 people who feel like insiders beats surface reach with 5,000 who feel like customers. Treat exclusivity as a design choice and not a lie. If you can only make 20 units by hand, say that plainly. That's real scarcity, and real scarcity doesn't need to be dressed up. Protect your long term brand equity by refusing to chase every chin that can get you short term attention. Chrome Heart spent decades saying no to things other brands said yes to. That restraint is what let the brand still feel singular 30 years later. It's what keeps it niche and why it's still making a fuck ton of money. Why Chrome Heart jeans 50 to 100 to $200,000 a jean, right? A brand that chases every wave ends up standing for nothing by the time the tide goes out. None of this requires money. It requires patience and a willingness to build slowly towards something specific instead of quickly towards something generic. The brand DNA, okay? Here's what Chrome Heart sells, right? Sterling silver and gold jewelry, leather goods, eyewear, apparel, furniture, and lifestyle objects. All of these handcrafted, primarily at their Hollywood production facility. What they actually sell is belonging to an exclusive insider world built on rock and roll rebellion and old world craftsmanship. The feeling of knowing something that mainstream has caught up to you. Their unfair advantage, nearly 4 decades of genuine subculture rule combined with family ownership that has never had to answer to outside investors. History and creative control that cannot be manufactured or bought by competitors. Now, what brand should steal is not the crosses or the gothic font, but the discipline of letting real constraint, and craft, and access and scale create the scarcity instead of faking it with marketing tricks. The biggest misconception about home hearts is that desirability comes from aesthetic. The aesthetic is the invisible layer. The actual engine is decades of restraint, authenticity, and a refusal to explain itself to anyone. Chrome Hearts didn't sell jewelry. It sold access to a world it had never had advertised because the world was real before it ever was a brand, okay? The conclusion, lesson, never to become Chrome Hearts. Lesson is understanding the system that made people care. Every iconic brand leaves clues. The goal isn't to copy them. It's to understand the systems behind them and build something original. That's going to be it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. And if you did, drop a like, comment, and subscribe. And check out the clothing brand clubutopia.us. We're going to be dropping some relatively soon. They're gonna be very, very hard. Yeah, it's your boy Haki, and I'm out. Peace.